Welcome to the Home Path Podcast. This is Raphael, and today we're going to talk about why home prices aren't dropping anytime soon. And I feel like I've talked about this topic over the years. A lot of people have speculated that, including myself, that home prices were climbing up so fast. I even personally sold my home back in 2016 thinking that the market was going to crash. This is way before the pandemic. And I went through one of the times I actually bought my very first home. I bought it in 2010. So I was right around that time with the collapse. That's when I bought my first property. And I was one of the people that took advantage of those prices that dropped back in 2010. And, my property value climbed so fast. I couldn't believe it. And I said, you know what? This doesn't seem real. I think something's going to happen. And the reason why I said that is because I looked at different driving factors. And two of the driving factors that I looked at why I was looking at home prices and how they might decline. And boy, was I wrong. The first driving factor was credit card defaults were on the rise at that time in 2016. So I think finally August of 2016, I sold my home. And one of the things that I looked at is, well, when people start letting go of their credit cards, right, what happens next? Well, guess what? The second report that came out during that time was that car loan defaults were on the rise as well. So now I started to see a pattern where I said, okay, if credit card defaults are on the rise, now car loan defaults are on the rise. What's next? Well, homes. So, I took a look at these metrics and I said, people are in a lot of trouble and a lot of debt. So I decided to sell my property. And I think it's doubled since then. And one of the things that, we've all continued to look at data that sometimes we think, I wasn't just look at speculation that, prices will just decrease for the sake of it. But I was looking at data based on patterns. Now, one of the things that we didn't anticipate was the pandemic. We didn't anticipate this coming in and creating lower interest rates and, driving up the demand, which also inflation happened with all the money that was being printed. So a lot of things that you will notice and that I can talk about because I lived through it. So this is the big difference between somebody that's just telling you that, what they think is going to happen is because I lived through the first time and then through the pandemic was, if you notice that in 2008, 2009, 2010, if somebody didn't pay their mortgage, they would put a letter on their door and kick them out. They also had a program called Cash for Keys. I don't know if a lot of you remember, probably give you PTSD, but they would just tell you, here's $3,000 and get out. A lot of people would take that money and leave after probably being there for 6-9 months. It was a disaster. Some people were in their house without paying for 2 years, and they were trying to get loan modifications. Some of them had to be short sold, or their home was sold at the steps of the courthouse. It was a hot mess. So it was a time that you would have to live through that. It impacted a lot of families, and it was very sad because a lot of them put a lot of money down. They were in bad loans, adjustable loans. They did stated income. They worked at a fast food joint, and they said they were making like $10,000 a month. And then when that interest finally reset, they weren't able to make the payment. So it was a lot of bad times for people, and especially, when they lost everything, a lot of times they would try to keep up with the payment and only that they would still get foreclosed on. So it was a really bad time for people, and they would end up on the street. That's what happened during that time. Some people talk about it, some don't. I lived it. I was in the trenches talking with families, and it was just a terrible time. But if you fast forward into the pandemic, one of the biggest differences is that the bank didn't kick anybody out because they had a quote unquote pandemic. They couldn't be out in the street, right? Coughing on everybody and whatever they said. So what did the banks do? They said, you know what? Let's pretend this didn't happen. what we're going to do is we're not going to forgive the money that you haven't paid over the last 6 months or the last year. What we're going to do is we're going to put that on the back of your loan. So you still owe it. And then you're going to just start making payments as if nothing happened. So nobody got kicked out. There was no fees. There was no attorneys. There was no foreclosures, nothing like that. A lot of people were able to redeem themselves by being able to just start making payments. Maybe they went back to their job. A lot of people lost their businesses. It was a really rough time. And what happened is that a lot of people thought that all of this inventory or all these people were going to be kicked out, but they weren't. The banks never kicked them out. They said, let's just forget about this. We're going to just put it behind us. You still owe it, so it's not forgiven. And that's what people did. They started making payments. So that's one of the biggest difference that you would have to realize, is that there was so much inventory in 2010 that it was unbelievable, because there's just so many people that were getting kicked out of their homes. So the bank doesn't want land or houses. They want their money. So they, turned around and sold them. Some is called short sales, which means for a really cheap price, they just wanted their money. That's what they wanted. So that's what took place. And this time around, it was completely different because nobody got kicked out. And a lot of people were also locked into really cheap interest rates. And that's one of the biggest differences between the two, and why you're going to see that these houses are not dropping anytime soon, is because there really isn't a whole lot of inventory. And, interest rates and higher prices is driving that up. I think one of the things that you're going to start seeing is that people are going to start moving to different cities with like new builds, because the cost of living is going to go up when you're coastal. Maybe you grew up in a coastal community, but based on whatever job or career path you chose, you may not be able to afford that. So you might have to go inland and start looking at houses that are like half the price in an area that you've never been in. But if you want to stay in the state, that's what you're going to have to do. I think that's one of the biggest problems we have right now with buyers, is not wanting to compromise and say, you know what? The reality is that I chose this career path, and this is what I can afford, and it requires me to move into this area. And I think that's that's a realistic thing that happens, is like you may have to do that, or you may have to stay in the same place and make more money, or keep renting. There's not a whole lot of options. And a lot of times you can't really buy, because you may have kids that are in a school district, they're about to graduate, they have great friends, and those are some sacrifices as a family that you have to make and say, you know what, we're going to pass on buying because we're going to continue renting until our son or daughter graduates. And that's realistic, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, I was a senior when we moved and in high school, and I had to commute to my school in order to keep the same school, the same district, and to graduate. It wasn't fun, but it happens to a lot of families. So those are the things that you're looking at and saying, why aren't the prices going to drop soon? Is there a crash coming? Look, a lot of people have been waiting for that crash since like 2016, 17, 18, 19, 20, all 2020 all the way to 2025. And the only thing that is guaranteed is they're paying more in rent. So you can continue to speculate, right? When you can try and time the market, but you're never going to time it. It's not going to happen. And some people finally give in. I've helped people recently that have been looking for like 3 years, and they're like, man, these houses are more expensive, or the homeowner's insurance is more expensive, or the taxes are more expensive. Everything overall ends up going up. It's not going to just stay the same. And the interest rates are a little bit higher. So what happens when all of this cost goes up and you keep making the same amount at work, the amount that you can afford goes down. So whatever house you want right now, if you keep waiting, chances are you're going to have to maybe not get a 5-bedroom. You're going to get a 3-bedroom with 2 bath for the same price down the road, because that's what's happened to a lot of people. And they're like, man, I wish I would have just bought 2 years ago when rates were a little bit lower. The house was probably $40,000 less. And that's what happens when you wait. There is a cost of waiting. So they're not dropping soon because there's not a whole lot of inventory. A lot of people are also locked into low interest rates that they don't want to let go of. A lot of people that fell back in the pandemic and their payments were just kept in their home. They're not kicking them out. So they're like, you tell me, where do you see something else? Because everything has been tested already and there's really nowhere in sight. One of the things that you'll notice is that they're just going to start, building new cities, new home construction, and depending on where you live, some of it's good, some of it's not good. They're building in congested areas. Some parts of San Diego where I see it's already congested and they're just continue to build and the roads are still narrow and the same. So, a lot of times when they come, the working class from, 9 to 5, it's just the traffic times are going to get a lot longer because the commute is going to get a lot longer because it's just too congested. So a lot of times, we start looking at new different cities with new builds and saying, hey, maybe would you consider the possibility of moving to a new area? So you have to look at the impact also from inflation on real estate. The cost of materials to build is different. So there's just a lot of different variables of what to look for. Now, over the next 5 years, there's a lot that can change. One for sure is the interest rates. I think there's still a lot of room for improvement. But one of the things that will continue to drive up is going to be the cost of living. So no matter, if you go back from the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, 2000s, no matter what, you can't really go back and say, yes, it's cheaper. It's always gone, more expensive, even rentings. And, how much did someone rent a, apartment by the beach, for $500 a month in the early 90s versus now, it's probably like $3,000 a month or something like that. So it's the price of living coastal has gone up, and for first time home buyers, I would just say you have to take action. You can't keep trying to time the market because you can't just keep waiting for home prices to drop. In fact, the sooner you get in, the sooner you can start paying off that balance and gain appreciation, because over time, I would say over like 10-year period, that's when it starts going up. So when rates drop, what's going to happen is that, and that's the other thing, it's not just if home prices drop or rates drop, but when prices drop, there's more competition because it's going to be a buzzword. This is what happens. There's a buzzword and then it gets spread on social media and the news. So now you feel that it is the time, although you don't know what it actually cost you a week ago versus now in payment wise, but because it's a buzzword, you want to go and apply for a mortgage. But guess what? Everybody else wants to apply for a mortgage. Everybody and their mom is going to say, hey, let's go, buy a home now because we just heard that interest rates dropped. That's it. You don't know how much by, you just that they dropped. They dropped by a millimeter, 0.5%. It's always the buzzwords that gets people. And a lot of times they'll say, you know what, we've been trying to buy and, they can't get their offer accepted. Well, yeah, because it creates a lot of competition. Everybody's going to want to apply for a mortgage when this quote unquote interest rates drop. So it's not always the best time because then you're going to have a lot of competition. That means that the person behind you made an offer for, $500,000, and then you want to go to 505, and then somebody wants to outbid you, so they're going to go to 515, and now it just creates a bidding frenzy, and it's not good for you because now that's something you can't refinance. You can't refinance how much you buy the house for, but as time goes on, you can refinance the rate. And I know this term gets thrown out there like, oh, marry the house and date the rate and all that stuff. Well, it's you can let that go. It's more of like you taking action, and at some point, the rates will cool down, or you can do, different things to save up a little bit more money. Try to throw off the interest rate calculator. If you haven't listened to the past episode on how to do that, go back and listen to that episode, how to do that. But home prices haven't come down, and we just have a lack of inventory. And what you can expect going forward is that as soon as the rates do drop, you're going to have a lot of competition. So unless you have some money saved up or you're excited to do some bidding wars, that's what's going to happen when interest rates drop. So I hope this helped. And if you are still on the fence of doing that, just take a look at how much you've been paying for rent over the last 5 years. Or how long have you been speculating that things will change? And they haven't. They just only got more expensive. So if you've been trying to buy for the last 5 years, just add up how much you've been paying in rent over the last 5 years, and you're never going to see that money again. Just think about that. And if that doesn't motivate you to actually do something, at least start heading in that direction. Check your credit report, look at your finances, and see if you're even in a position to be able to buy. So, hope that was helpful, and I will talk to you guys on the next episode.